Hey everybody, my name's Ann McKittrick. I'm with Nurtured Noggins, and I had a little technical glitch there. It wasn't getting started when I thought it was going to. So here we are, live on our Facebook page, and I just wanted to say hello, and I hope all things are going well with you and your children, and that your babies and little ones are doing really well. As I said, Nurtured Noggins is our business, and our goal is to teach you to see and appreciate and understand your child and yourself through a developmental lens. And so we really take a lot of time to look at child development and what should happen and what is happening with children at different ages from birth to 3. But I also really like to focus in on adult development as well, because I think that where we are as adults makes a huge difference in our approach to parenting and just kind of how we're able to manage it. It certainly has changed for me over the years. And so anyways, that's kind of what we're all about. I'm a parent, a grandparent, and an early childhood professional. I've been doing this for my whole career. I love teaching children, but also teaching people about children, parents and teachers as well. So that's what I do. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about critical periods of development. And I've been thinking about this recently, just some mommy groups that I read and kind of see what people are thinking and talking about. I love to see their questions. And but also I've been thinking about some friends of ours who have a baby, and he got cancer. He was diagnosed with cancer, leukemia, very young. I think he was probably, not much more than 6 months of age, maybe 7 or 8, but not very old at all. He was just got really sick and had to go to the hospital and be hospitalized for a long time. He was in treatment for, I think it was 9+ months that he was in the hospital, didn't get to leave. And so he was in the hospital with, going through all these procedures and all of this invasive stuff, this poor little guy, during those critical periods of development when he should have been learning language and learning his gross motor skills and his fine motor skills and all of those things that happen in the first year of first year of life. He was not able to do those things. And so, they made the most of it because there were some things that they could do in the hospital. And of course, there's lots of play therapy and child life workers who came in every day to do all that they could to support his development. But, and he's doing well now. He's home and he's an active toddler, so he's doing great now. But anyways, he had to learn, the period of time that he was in the hospital would have been the period of time that he would have learned to walk at home. And so when he was in the hospital, he couldn't learn to walk because he couldn't go very far from his pole that had all the IVs and medications and all of the, the things that were reading all of his stats at any, 24/7. He was tied up to this IV pole. And so he was able to do a little bit of movement, not a lot, and he certainly wasn't able to move enough to take steps and go away, very far away. But he could climb, and he would sit on the couch with his mom and dad, and he would climb up the back of the couch, climb up the window, sit in the windowsill, climb down to the floor, just all this up and down climbing. He is a very, very good climber. But when he came home, he was walking a little in the hospital, but he didn't have the space and the ability to do as much as he did at home. Since he's been home, he's mastered this skill, and he's a very fine walker now, and running and jumping and hopping and doing all of those things. But he's an especially good climber, and he climbs everything in their house. Kitchen counters, tables, coffee tables, everywhere. He's just a big old climber. So we spend a lot of time problem solving on that, because you don't want to discourage that kind of play, especially for a child who has, had all this hindrance in his development. But there are these critical windows of brain growth when certain things that happen in a child's development in the first year need to happen. And so what I've just described is what happens if this critical window is open. This is open for learning to walk, but he's not able to walk. He's not able to have that practice and get what he needs. And so what happens during this critical window will either, support and help a child's development, or it can hinder a child's development. And so if it's hindered, in this case, this little guy was hindered in his ability to learn to walk, that doesn't mean that it can't happen. It just means that when it does happen, it will be a very intentional, concentrated focus on that particular skill that has been missed during this critical window. Our brains are very plastic. They can go back and relearn things. It's all about that. When people are in accidents, they can learn all of these things to do when there's brain damage. And so I wanted to just kind of focus in a little bit on emotional development today. And so the critical window for emotional development is 0 to 48 months. And so from the time your child is born until they turn 4 years old, somewhere thereabouts, they are getting the foundation for their emotional development, which will support their emotional health in the older years, from the time they go through elementary school into teen and then adult years. And so it's a really important critical window. And in the first year, 0 to 12 months, the brain is wired for trust. And so when we respond to our baby in the first year of life, we are teaching them that they can trust the environment, they can trust us to take care of them, and therefore they learn to trust their world. A child who is not able to trust their world has trouble with this as time goes on. It doesn't mean that they can't learn it, because there are certainly situations where a child, for some reason or another, is not in a trusting environment in the first 12 months. And that can be fixed with this intentional, focused care and development through the time. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about what does that look like in the first year to support trust. And there's just a few things that you can do, and these are the things that every parent does naturally. But when you know the why for it, I think it really does help you in the day-to-day, because sometimes it can get a little tricky in the day-to-day. So the first thing that we need to do to establish trust is we need to attend to a child's cries. And so, contrary to popular belief, your child is not trying to manipulate you in the first year of life with their crying. They just simply aren't capable of it. Their brain isn't that developed. They don't have that kind of cognitive ability to, think about, well, if I cry, she'll come, and then I can get this and this and this. That comes a little bit later on. But when your baby cries in the first year, they need you. They need something. And the crying is the only way that they can communicate. Most babies by 12 months only have maybe 3 or 4 words that they can say. Now, sign language is a great way to teach your child to communicate, and that's a great bridge from not being able to speak to getting your verbal language. But your little one cannot communicate except through crying initially as a newborn, and then they begin to use their voice and inflection and grunts and groans and oohs and coos to speak to you, but it's still not words, usually until around 12, 14 months they begin to speak. I think a typical 12-month-old would have around 4 to 6 words that you know what they mean. They'll have a lot more words than that you don't know what they mean. So anyways, when you attend to their cries, you are teaching them that you hear them and that they are, important enough to you for you to come and respond to them, and therefore they can trust you to take care of them when they express a need. Another thing is just taking care of the basics of a child's needs, feeding them, making sure they get good sleep, keeping them clean, changing their diaper, taking them outside. Consistent routines are very, very important in establishing trust. And then also a very calm environment is very helpful. These are just the basics of parenting, but sometimes we can kind of get caught up, especially when there's a lot of chaos going on, as to the perspective of the baby in your arms. What is it that they are experiencing? And so we want to always keep that in mind as we are just going about the day-to-day with our baby. The third thing is that your baby is reading your expressions and listening to the inflection of your voice. And so, this is also a kind of an inborn thing, an intuitive thing with parents, actually with all people. Most people, when they talk to a baby from 0 to 12 months of age, or sometimes a little older, they'll use something that's called parent-ease, or, mother-ease. And this is just kind of the sing-song, slow speech that we use when we talk to babies. And if you have a baby and you're walking around in public, or people come to see your baby, you know that, or you may notice that they talk, and this baby talk is what we might also call it. But it's just something that adults do in order to support language development, and it's just kind of innate. It's built in us, but that's a very pleasant thing for children, and it allows them to begin to do all of the coding that they need to neurologically to figure out the meaning of language and words that they hear. But they can read your emotions. They can read your social expression, your facial expressions, and the tone of your voice, and so that's a really interesting thing. There's a really, to me, a fascinating experiment called this still face experiment, where they put a baby and a mother in a kind of in a laboratory setting and watch what happens when the mom takes all the expression out of her face. And so there's a really great show on Netflix right now called Babies, and you can learn so much about your baby by watching this. It's kind of a documentary type show, and so the one on Love, the very first episode, shows this still baby experiment, and so that might be worth taking the time to look at that, because it really does show us in a very obvious way how important our facial expression is when we are around our baby. And so we need to keep them congruent. The tone of our voice and the facial expression and the care that we're giving need to kind of match up, and they need to, be congruent. And then one more thing that we can do to support their emotional development is to always respond to children when they coo, or when they babble and they smile. And this is something else that just comes naturally to new parents, or to all parents. We smile back at our children when they smile at us. With their first smile is just, it's like, write it down in the book. It's a very important moment when your baby first smiles at you intentionally. Newborns will smile, but it's not really an intentional smile quite yet. And then after a few weeks, maybe 3, 4, 5 weeks, they will look at you in the face and they will give you a smile, and that's when your heart melts and you become fully attached, and you're not ever going to let go of that kid. So when your baby coos and babbles and smiles and you respond, what you are communicating is that they are a person who is separate and apart from you, and they are able to influence others around them. And this is what helps develop their sense of self, which is an extremely important part of emotional development, is the development of a sense of self. And we really see that sense of self come into play in the second year of life, when a child becomes a toddler and they learn that they have a lot of power and that they can control their world with their personal power. And that's a really neat thing to see as well. Last thing that we can do to support emotional development in the first year or first few years is to protect and nurture our children from overstimulation. When it doesn't happen that much now because of all of the COVID restrictions, but there are times when we are in a situation with our baby and it's just too much, and it's too much for them, and it's really important as the parent to take your child away. If somebody's holding them and they're you can see that they're getting a little stressed and they need you, plan in advance how you're going to graciously say, hey, I think she needs for me to give her some comfort right now. I'm gonna hold her now, or just to help help your baby calm down if they get too overstimulated. That's a really important part of their emotional development. Because if they stay overstimulated, then there's things that are happening neurologically that, just they need to calm down. You don't want to stay in that state of hyper overstimulation for long. It's not good for us neurologically. It's not good for us as adults, but it's especially not good for little ones. So that's about it for just the little lesson on emotional development in the first few years. I do have one question. This live is a question and answer session, and so if you are watching and you have any questions, feel free to stick them in the comments and I will be happy to answer them. Or when you see the notice come up for this Facebook Live, I'm going to do it each Tuesday at 12:30. I'd be more than happy to take your individual questions and see if I can't help you with them. But here's our question. Should the house always be perfectly clean once the baby is born? And this is from Emily G. And that's a great question because, in reality, our houses are not perfectly clean pretty much ever, but especially if you have a new baby in the house. And so there are some things that we do need to do, however, to keep a baby healthy. And this, what I'm getting ready to say first, is just general, overall, like 6 months ago, what we would have said, how we would have answered this question. And the first thing is to wash your hands often. This is kind of a given, and you learn this in the hospital anytime you... I used to work in an infant room, and I had 8 babies that I cared for, and any infant teacher knows that you are washing your hands so many times a day, before and after every diaper change, before and after every bottle, before and after every feed, before and after every wiping the nose, cleaning up the spit up. We wash our hands a lot, but at home, you still need to wash your hands frequently when you're caring for your baby, just to protect them from any germs that might be getting around. Sterilizing your pacifiers and bottles is a really important part of keeping your baby healthy in the first year, of course. Cleaning your kitchen and toilet and bathroom, the places where all of the big bad germs are collecting all the time. It's always good just to have some wipes or have some bleach water spray that you can spray on those handles and places like that. Wiping down the counters and the floors often and allowing them to air dry will really cut down on the amount of germs and keep your baby healthier and everyone in the family healthy. We got to keep ourselves healthy too when we have a new baby. It's really important that we try to do all we can to stay healthy ourselves. But with COVID, we have certain considerations, and this is nothing new, but I will say that anytime anyone's coming into your house during COVID, if they are, you need to ask them to wear a mask and just, protect your baby from any exposure that could happen. And of course, you would want to keep some distance there as well. And then the last thing with COVID is just probably best to stay home. And that's kind of the directives, I believe, that pediatricians are giving to every new parent at this time. Just, don't go out, just stay at home. And so it's going to lead to some really interesting observations, I think, in time to come and months to come, to see how children are faring with this stay-at-home stuff and not getting out in the world. I think it's going to be really, really interesting, and I think it's actually going to be pretty good for the most part that parents and children are spending so much good time at home together. So there's a certain amount of germs that are good for a baby, and we need to be aware of that. I'm going to refer back to that Netflix series called Babies in episode 2, which is on food or eating. There's quite an interesting conversation or discussion of the germs that babies get as they mouth everything, which they do because they're in the oral stage of development in the first year and a half or so. The exposure to germs that they get is not a bad thing. It creates a good immune system in their bodies, and it's part of the process of being human is being exposed to all of these microorganisms and allowing your body to figure out how to deal with them. So it does keep your baby healthy to have some germs, but of course we know how important it is right now to keep most germs away from our kids. So that is it. Unless somebody has something you'd like to say or ask, I'm going to just give it a second. While I wait, I do have a freebie. If you are expecting a new baby and are interested, I've got a freebie called How to Give Your Newborn a Bath. I'll put that in the comments, the link to that, and you can download that. It's just a little mini course, a video that teaches you how to do a top and tail with your baby, and also how to give them a bath in the kitchen sink, and then also how to do an infant massage. So that is it for today. Thank you for joining me, and I will be back next Tuesday at 12:30. Bye-bye.